One of your assigned readings this week is the first chapter of Jürgen Moltmann's Experiences in Theology. Moltmann, I don't agree with a lot of what he says, but he's easily my favorite contemporary 20th century and to some extent 21st century theologian. And the reason for that is, if you watch the last video about constructive theology, there was no term constructive theology when Moltmann began doing what he was doing, but he is the quintessential constructive theologian. He believes that, theology should have a whole bunch of different inputs, right? It should be a big conversation with the tradition and the sciences and academia and real life and people. He was kind of ahead of his time in terms of, listening to marginalized voices, for example, and hearing them and incorporating their words into the way that he was thinking. I mean, now it's funny, now it kind of can come off as a little bit patronizing in some of the ways, a little bit, well, he was doing something that no one else was doing, and as a result, it's a little bit antiquated at this point. But he really did have this sense that theology is something that's located. It's something we do together, but we as people, our pasts, our histories, what he calls the Sitz im Leben, which is the German for situation in life. And it's what German biblical scholars were trying to figure out. In order to understand texts, they would try to cast a vision of what the situation in life was for the author or the first hearers of a text, and that helped them understand what texts meant. And what Moltmann understood is that very thing, this notion that we're human, we're physical, we have connections to people, we have histories and stories, that they have a profound impact on the way we think theologically. Moltmann himself came to Jesus as a prisoner of war in World War II. He was a Nazi soldier who was captured by the British, and he came to faith because someone witnessed to him in a British prison. And he comes to church, he comes to theology. When he returns to Germany, he finds himself in the Reformed tradition, and he is very aware from a very early stage in his theology that what he believes about God is dramatically impacted by the fact that he was a World War II prisoner of war. It's dramatically impacted by the fact that his country and his people perpetrated the Holocaust. When he's thinking through theology and he's coming to God with questions, he's not just coming to God as a computer program that's trying to spit out the answers. He recognizes that who you are as a person is a really important theological input. And so when he discusses his own theological method, the title is Experiences in Theology. Theology is a journey. It's an activity. I love in the beginning of Experiences in Theology, he even says, anyone's a theologian if you've endured suffering from God and you've encountered delight in God. Anyone who's truly suffered in and with and from God, and anyone who's truly delighted and been overwhelmed by God's beauty, you're a theologian. It doesn't matter if you've learned Greek. That might help, but that too is just another input. Every human being has the capacity to do theology reflectively. And so as a result, I think one of the things that's happening in 21st century theology is there's this move to include and hear as many different voices as possible. It doesn't mean we necessarily agree with everyone we listen to, but it does mean that there is value, there is a kind of veracity to every experience of God and life. And it doesn't mean that we have to agree on really anything. It just means that there's a legitimacy to doing theology from everywhere. And in the tradition, traditionally speaking, especially the last 500 years or so, theology has been European and North American, but primarily European, and primarily from people in the upper classes. That's just the fact. And there might be something that's being missed if that's where all reflection, all God talk comes from. In fact, if we are pretty honest, and we will be in this course when we kind of engage some of theology from the margins, we're going to see that, if you kind of just read the Bible, it's usually not, the elites who are the good guys. They're usually the bad guys. And there's something to that, and it's worth recognizing that whatever we're doing theologically, where's it coming from? What are your sources? Who are you listening to? What is your story? And does that maybe have a really strong impact on where you land on things? And so I think one of the values, one of the great things I love so much about Fuller is that, every course here is populated by people from just extravagantly different. Can you say that? Extravagantly different? Exceedingly different, variegated, many, many different places, many, many different situations and experiences, many different countries, and that, I think, has the possibility of challenging who we are and where we come from, but also giving us the ability to critically reflect on what we believe and come to a firmer grasp on what is true and what matters. The goal, for this course is not to change your mind about anything or to cause you to believe anything a whole lot more. The goal is for you to encounter objections, encounter different ideas, different possibilities, and really prayerfully think through so that you can come to a place where you can, with great conviction, say, this is where I stand, I can do no other. That's Martin Luther. But at the same time, also have an appreciation for the fact that other people have come to different conclusions, but they too are standing and they can do no other. And that's okay. We can live with those tensions. And the reason that we can do that, especially at Fuller, is because Fuller has a uniform confession of faith. Okay, whatever you believe about, say, speaking in tongues, or, cessationism, or election, or the problem of evil, whatever you think God's experience of time is like, all those things truly they're subsidiary issues. And they are things that we can agree or disagree on without impacting our unity as Christians. And I say this because it's very, very important for Christians to remember and to recognize that what unites us is a very simple telling of the world's story. Well, not simple, but it doesn't have... It's incredibly profound, it's mysterious, and it's wild, but it doesn't determine all these other smaller branches of theological reflection, right? Whether you're Pentecostal or Presbyterian or Baptist or Catholic or whatever, Orthodox, if you confess the Trinity, you confess Father, Son, and Spirit, you confess the resurrection of Jesus, his crucifixion for our sins, and you confess his coming again, guess what? If you just confess all those things, you're in keeping with 2,000 years of Christian theology. Doesn't mean that if you met, Origen or Augustine or Aquinas or whomever, you wouldn't have big fights with them. You would, probably, about a lot of things, but you would still be in the same family because the way that you see the world has been shaped by what we call the regula fide, the rule of faith. The rule of faith is what all Christians have believed always and everywhere. And it is very simple. It's the Trinity. It's Jesus is human and divine. Jesus dies for our sins. Jesus is raised from the dead by the Spirit, or in the Spirit. Jesus rises at the Father's right hand. Jesus is coming back to set everything right. That's it. There's a lot there, and that's incredibly profound. It's going to have a huge impact in our life and what we do, but I didn't say anything there about all of the issues that, that divide us. And I think Moltmann's, one of the gifts that he gives to the 21st century is he's a pioneer in holding fast to some convictions, being willing to be experimental and creative in the way that he thinks about God and death and humanity, and yet also very charitable and generous. And if we can have that spirit as we engage theology in each other, I think we're going to have a really, really meaningful, profound, and potentially life-changing experience together as we all become theologians.